my name's Leanne Minshall. I've just moved to Canberra, but home for me most of the time is Nipaluna, Hobart, which is in Lutruwita, Tasmania. And it's been about 15 years since I've been to Fremantle, and I'd like to start the night by acknowledging that these are the unceded lands of the Wadjuk people. And I have been told, someone can correct me, but the broader area here is Walyup. Is that right? Yeah. And is there a traditional name for Fremantle, or is Walyup Fremantle? Okay. All right. Well, this evening, so I'm from the Australia Institute. We're hosting this event. We did another one on Monday night over in Churchlands, talking about cost of living and how climate change is fueling the cost of living crisis. But tonight we're going to be talking about gas and the multiple problems that gas exploration and export mean for WA, what it means for our country and what it means for the rest of the planet. There is somebody here taking photos, and tonight's event will also be filmed. So if you don't want your photo taken, maybe indicate that to me. Okay. No? Okay, thank you. So the Australia Institute's headquartered in Canberra. We've been going for 30 years. We're Australia's, I think we're the best, but we're also the largest public policy institute. We work to change minds, and we barrack for ideas. We don't barrack for parties. And I wanted to say that particularly tonight because we are in an election campaign in WA. It is a state election, obviously. And that will be weighing on people's minds. But what we're talking about tonight and the issue of gas and the gas industry is something that's going to go far beyond the state election. And so I'm really thrilled that we've got our principal advisor, Mark Ogge, here. And we've also, obviously, we've got John Butler, who I'm sure most of you know. So, yeah, woohoo! So I'm going to hand over to Mark in a minute. He's going to go through some slides and a presentation. Then we're going to hear a little bit from John around his experience in helping to move change through activism, art, culture, music. Then we'll have a Q&A. I'm really interested to hear some good questions from the audience. We do have to keep it tight, as I said. And then we're going to show you a brand new ad that's been put together. It's a collaboration between the Australia Institute and John Butler, and it's the creatives at the Berlin ad company that have done an amazing job, and you guys are going to be the first to see it, and then it'll be on screens everywhere. So that's a bit of a treat to end the night off with. So I'll hand over now to Mark, and he'll take you through some gas facts.
No worries. Thanks, Leanne. So I've got the unenviable task of you're all here, John, and I'm going to be standing here with nerdy gas energy graphs to show you. So I promise I won't take too long. But the reason I'm doing that is because the gas industry is having a huge impact in Western Australia. So the emissions from the gas industry, from gas exports in Western Australia, including when the gas is burnt overseas, around 180 million tonnes a year. So there's 153 individual countries in the world with less emissions than that. It's a huge amount, and it's more than all of Australia's coal power stations, for instance. So, and there's also, other enormous issues around environment and that kind of thing. Now, I'm going to be talking about the economic issues with gas, but one thing I'd really like to stress is that the important issues are the issues that everybody here, I think, cares about. So the impact of these massive big gas projects on the climate and on the reef and on Murujuga artwork and on the Kimberley, they're the important things, they're the things we're all passionate about, and they're the really important things to talk about and keep focused on. It would be, what I don't want the lesson for people to take is that we've got to all go off and talk about the economics, because that's talking into the gas industry's frame, right? But it's important to have a bit of an understanding of the economics, because the power of the gas industry, the way they basically make our elected representatives into their glove puppets and get everything that they want, is by creating the perception that gas is incredibly important for energy and jobs and revenue and all of that kind of thing. Now, most of that is actually untrue. They give a very distorted picture, and I liken it a little bit to the Wizard of Oz. They create this illusion that they're central to everything about Western Australia, but if you pull back the curtain, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? And I'm gonna talk through a little bit of that, and that's actually a very hopeful thing, because it's all a sham, because their power is based on, is a bit of a house of cards. That means that it can be debunked. It's difficult to debunk because they spend so much money on advertising, that kind of thing, but we do have reality on our side, which is a great advantage. So, first in terms of jobs, the gas industry Australia-wide employs less than 0.25% of the workforce. In WA it's a bit bigger, but it's well and truly under 1% of the workforce. Other industries, like the health industry, employ about 20 times more people, and the education is about 14 times more. The public service is about 16 times more. But these industries, you never hear these industries banging on about jobs, do you? The reason that the gas industry bangs on about jobs is that they don't create many, and they try and they basically try and cover up for that. In terms of so that's the they have all of these claims about jobs. They also, there are other kind of, and that's a chart there, and the little red bit at the bottom is the jobs created by the oil and gas industry in Western Australia, and all of those other bars are other industries. So the health industry is creating 20 times as many jobs as the oil and gas industry, but doesn't feel the need to talk about it. Now, the other claim they make is that they provide a huge amount of taxes and royalties that build schools and hospitals, all of that kind of thing. In reality, they export a huge amount of gas, but nationwide, they get most of that gas for free. They don't pay royalties on over half the gas. The Commonwealth Government gives them that gas for free. And in Western Australia, that's 73% of the gas. So they get the gas for free, and in the case of Western Australia, they then process it and ship it overseas and sell it for over $100 billion last year, right? Getting it for free. So, and in terms of the perception is that the Western Australian budget would fall over without gas royalties. Well, gas royalties in the Western Australian budget make up about 1.3% of Western Australia's budget, and that's going to drop a lot, by about 2/3 in the next 4 years, because the gas fields that are subject to royalties are running out, and the new gas fields like Scarborough, they're going to get that gas for free as well. So currently Western Australian drivers pay about more than twice the amount in car rego or vehicle rego as the gas industry, and that's going to be 6 times as much in about 4 years. Now, as well as paying royalties, they should be paying tax, and there's a tax that was specifically designed for the oil and gas industry about 40 years ago. It's called the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax, and last year we found out that in all of that time, no export gas company had ever paid the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax, the tax that's designed specifically for them, and that's Australia-wide. The reason that they make deductions for money they spend like any business, and a lot of them will be legitimate, no doubt, but there have also been egregious cases of them avoiding tax, like when Chevron was charged $340 million for transfer pricing, and a similar situation in Shell where the ATO slugged them for almost $800 million. So these are enormous cases that were found to be tax avoidance. the other big argument they always use is that we need the gas for energy in Western Australia. 90% of the gas in Western Australia is exported. So this is all about exports. So the argument that they need to drill for more gas in order to keep the lights on in Western Australia is laughable. So 90% is exported, and that's represented by that big blue bar over there. That's all the gas that's being exported. The smaller columns, the yellow column next to it, which is the next biggest gas use, is the gas used by these companies to process the gas for export. That's the second biggest gas use in Western Australia. And that is 3 times the amount of gas that we use for electricity in Western Australia. And the manufacturing they're always talking about is those little blue bars there. So it's a tiny amount compared to what's exported. So, you know, when they say they need to drill new fields, all that means is that they can export more gas. It won't do anything to prevent shortages of gas in Western Australia or bring down prices, because they just drill new fields, bring a bit more gas in and then export it from gas that's currently supplying Western Australia. So it's a great big shell game. And I'm always stunned that our elected representatives fall for that. On top of that, they price gouge us for our own gas. So in 2020, the McGowan government made a decision to allow Woodside to export onshore domestic gas reserves from Western Australia. And what that did was linked the domestic gas market to the global gas market, which has much higher prices. And so since then, wholesale, and so that means that Woodside can make domestic customers, so who are running power stations or industry, etc., can make them compete with international customers for Western Australia's gas. And that's exactly what happened on the East Coast in 2015. And on the East Coast, electricity and gas prices tripled, and gas prices then tripled again, and the national electricity market had to be suspended because gas got so expensive that they couldn't afford to produce electricity with it. And that was all as a result of gas exports. And the same thing's happening in Western Australia. That arrow points to the point in 2020 when they started allowing domestic gas, the export of domestic gas reserves, and the black line is the wholesale electricity price in Western Australia. The orange line is the wholesale gas price, and households have been insulated a bit from this, or quite a lot from this, by government energy rebates and subsidies to Synergy, etc., that are taking up those extra costs. But that just means we're paying for it through our taxes rather than our energy bills, and that won't last anyway. Energy bills will go up as well. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit, coming back to the things the real things that we're passionate about. So Woodside's, so as I was saying, emissions from Western Australian gas exports are about 180 million tonnes a year, more than 153 individual companies. And when I'm deliberate in my use of the word gas exports from Western Australia, not Western Australia's gas exports, because I want to be really clear. A whole lot of gas is exported from Western Australia, but not by Western Australians. These companies are overwhelmingly foreign owned. They're getting the gas for free. They're often not paying tax, and the profits are expatriated overseas, right? But their big trick is to make us feel like it's our gas exports, and if anybody attacks, if anybody points out the emissions and all of those other problems, they play it as an insult to Western Australians, right? So that's the trick they use. Now, the emissions are enormous already, but the expansion at Barrow Hub, which is the extension of the Pluto LNG facility, the expansion of the Pluto LNG facility, and the 50-year extension of the Northwest Shelf will have emissions represented by the big bar there, you can see, and the smaller bars are the emissions from all of Australia's coal power stations. Sorry, not all of them. They're not all included, but that's the range. So that one expansion of Woodside's is going to create more emissions every year than all of Australia's coal power stations. we would never consider building, 30 new coal power stations. So it's amazing that it's sort of that governments are just feel very free to do something that's going to result in the same amount of emissions. So the power of the gas industry is enormous, but I think the fact that their power is based on really misleading claims means that it's kind of a house of cards. And I know I'm laying on the metaphor, but it really is a Wizard of Oz situation. That if you draw back the curtain, if we're able to draw back the curtain and communicate that effectively to people, then their power to a large extent evaporates. Thanks very much.
While I'm introducing John, can someone bring up a mic? We've got 6 microphones, so we shouldn't be having to share. So I was working 25 years ago in the late 90s, early 2000s on the Victorian Forest Campaign, and we invited John Butler along to sing at that at an environmental park called Ceres Permaculture Environmental Park. And we were going to be absolutely stoked. I was working for the Wilderness Society, and we were going to be stoked if we got 200, 300, maybe 400. We were just going to nail it. And then suddenly, through one of the entrances when we opened the gates, there was literally up to 1,000 people streaming through the gates. And I panicked, and I ran down to the other gate, and it was too late. There was this massive humanity also streaming in the gate. And I just thought, shit. And I ended up being a security guard that night for John Butler. He doesn't remember that. I was pretty upset when he couldn't remember that when I talked to him before. But why I'm telling that was why it's so great to have John here tonight and to talk about the power of all of us, but the power of music, creativity and community to create change. I remember seeing that the bump that we got to the Victorian Forest Campaign from John's involvement, I actually couldn't calculate it. I think it was to the power of 10. It wasn't linear change, it was step change. And so I'd like to hear from John some other examples of where he's seen that be created through community and music and activism.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and I'm good. How are you? Awesome. I feel a little strange being the only person in here. I've worked with so many amazing colleagues over the last 25 years. For country in Buja, I feel a little alone without my colleagues, but I'm in a really amazing Oz Institute sandwich at the moment, which is sick. So, where do I start? I start by saying, are any of you pissed off? Because everything that Mark said, by the end of it, I was pissed off. And that's where it started for me. I started in 1994, 1995. I was surrounded by a whole bunch of great non-violent direct activists who were saving the southwest of Western Australia, the forest down there, 300, 400-year-old trees were being chopped down, clear-felled, burnt, wood chipped, and sold for less than $1 a ton. We actually ran an office right over there. It was called Lorax, just down this road. And what I saw was an amazing group of young, passionate people making a difference and putting their life and limbs on the line. And I was playing music and designing album covers with my faces on it, and soon it started feeling a little self-indulgent, being surrounded by all my friends who I thought were doing the highest service, a civil service, essentially what the army is for, to protect land and country from people who want to abuse it. So when I hear and I see these facts, I take it personally. People always say, don't take it personally, it's just business. I take it personally because it's our water, my friends, their country, their dreaming, their culture, their grandchildren. And we have these psychopathic, and I think that's not hyperbole to say so, or at least sociopathic, or at least extremely substance addicted individuals who have no longer they've lost it. Like anybody, I'm sure many of us are aware or have people in our lives who are addicted to drugs, and those people will rip off their grandparents for it. It's because they have a disease. And I think that's what we're dealing with at the moment, the corporate capture that we're seeing, the revolving door that we're seeing in our state. And it's been happening ever since the Rum Corps, from the time this country was settled. It's just been passed on and passed on. It's the same thing. The power structures want to keep their thing going. But that's why I'm involved, because I see it as a sickness that's destroying our democracy, a sickness that's destroying our water. It's taking money out of your wallets, and at the same time, it's funding our grandchildren and our kids and the little nippers, and it's funding our favorite football teams, and they're parasitic in the way they latch on the culture and then completely do that. And that is something to take personally, because there's only so much you can be polite about being spat in the face and laughed at behind your back. But that's exactly what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They have the best economic people on side. They're accountants, they're lawyers. They know what they're doing. And that's the sociopathic nature of it. And that's what scares me, is what we're dealing with people who are not of sound mind. And they're willing to destroy our democracies, our water, our communities, our cultures, and our children's future. And I'm going to take that personally for the rest of my goddamn life until we change shit. And I think you guys would too. You know, I think that's the situation we're in right now, and that's how I see it. So I don't know if I'm off topic already, but my heart rate's up and I'm ready to go. So let's do this.
I think you're completely on topic, and just do a temperature check from the room. I know who else does feel pissed off with what's going on. Yeah. So I think you're on point there.
Oh, that's right. And you said, how does music help?
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
We can go wherever we want, and maybe have a think around, if you want to, how we can engage with each other in music and culture to sustain each other as well as fight back.
Yeah.
And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to pose a question to Mark, because I wanted some balance in tonight's conversation. So I read the sustainability reports of Woodside and Santos and the WA government. And they're all trying hard to get their scope 1 and 2 emissions down to net zero. And they also, so I'd like to ask if you've got an opinion on that, because the facts that you're telling are very different. And they also say that they've paid $75 billion in tax.
Okay, so in terms of the government and industry claims that they reduce emissions, first thing to understand is where the emissions are coming from, right? So when you pull gas out of the ground, there's emissions basically from leakage. That's methane going into the atmosphere, very powerful greenhouse gas. And that happens, you know, at the oil rig and the pipelines all the way, and kind of right through the process. But the second thing is the energy use. I pointed out the energy use in that little yellow bar. The energy use is massive, and that has a whole lot of emissions as well. Those emissions are counted in Australia, but then most of the emissions from gas is when the gas is burnt. But the gas, because 90% of it's exported, it's burnt overseas, so they're not counting that in Australia. So but that's the main emissions from gas, right? And the atmosphere doesn't care where the gas is burnt, right? That gas it can be burnt in Japan, it's still going to make Western Australia hotter, drier, and cause terrible hardship, not only to us, but to people all over the world.
So Mark, just to be clear, just to get the, when they say scope 1 and scope 2, when you showed that chart before, there was only 10% of gas that's used here.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to. Let's not even get into net zero versus real zero, but that's what they're promising to bring down, and they're just ignoring what we call scope 3, the 90% that goes overseas.
Yeah, so they're ignoring that.
Right.
But
I love how corporates and government make things really, really simple stuff quite difficult, so you don't get it.
So the net zeroing that little bit that's used here, and everything else that's being sold, it's not part of the calculation.
That's
Correct.
scope 3, John.
Correct.
catch up with reality, my friend.
Trying
So
to,
they don't
and it's
count.
the same thing, though, isn't it? It's just
I mean, almost comically, the reductions in the little bit that they are net zeroing is mostly bullshit anyway, because they're when you look into the detail, they're not actually planning to reduce the emissions from what they do. They're buying very cheap overseas offsets and calling that an emissions reduction, or in some cases depends. Well, sorry, that's on the state-based thing, but and federally, they have to use they have to get certified offsets. But there's massive problems with the offsets in the Australian system. There's been estimates that 80 to 90% of the offsets are fraudulent. By very credible people. In fact, the guy who used to run the integrity section of the Clean Energy Regulator that oversaw the integrity of those offsets. So it's all, again, like all their other claims, it's all smoke and mirrors, or almost all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Is that carbon offsets you're talking about?
Yeah, correct.
So basically you have corporate bodies buying land overseas, and the indigenous population is then being pushed off that land. Would that be a case?
Some of it are, some of it is, but it's offsets as a whole. It's another hour. It's a whole other hour, and but yeah, you've nailed it. It's again just trying to use smoke and mirrors to say I can do a bad thing here because I'm going to do a good thing over there, and the good thing isn't even really that good, but we won't look at it.
And it intersects with like traditional burning. We can use traditional burning for carbon offsets, and all of a sudden, a country that was meant to be mosaically burned once every 5 years in a very particular patchwork, now because there's millions of dollars going to those indigenous corporations, are now being burnt every year, and they've never been burnt every year. But in order to keep on getting that carbon offset cash, so it's the fuckery is deep.
Finally, we have some music. Have you thought about ways in that you've seen people coming together, culture, music, help to create change?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of take the Mary Poppins approach, which is spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And so how I can't speak for anybody else, but how I see it for myself is I'm a focal point to draw people in, like at Ceres, and then I just go, hey, how's everybody? Look over there. Leanne's saying some really cool shit that's way more important than what I'm doing right now. And I will be entertainment. And yeah, maybe I'll write some things that are on topic or not. It's the same, thing that we did 14 years ago. We put on a free concert at Esplanade. 25 to 30,000 people came. They went to see Missy and myself and the Pigram Brothers and all these things. But we were here for a bigger message. And what I found a lot of times, and probably one of the most powerful things about what art can do to give people agency, because what I notice is most of us are not very different. Most of us want to make change. We see the corporate capture in our society. We see the messing of the books, the legalese, all these things that are just way, way over our heads. And we're like, I don't know what to do. I mean, they're not even listening anymore. And I think the times that we live in now are probably the most perverse times I've ever seen as far as how much they don't care to hide it. And then you create a concert, and I think that's really important about what we did last week at the brewery, or what we did at the Esplanade. Make it free, because people were struggling with cash. And, they may not want to go to a gas concert, but they want to go to a free concert and get involved. And then when those 30,000 people came and we shut down the mobile system, that sent a message. That sent a message to the government that, these are the people who are voting for us. And no, it's not about that. I guess it's an example that I can only speak to because I was part of it. There's other examples I just don't know nothing of. And Brad was a huge ally, wherever you are, Brad. Brad was amazing. Brad was mayor of this town. And we had a meeting with him, and he's like, yeah, put on a free concert at the Esplanade for this. And what it did is it just gave everybody agency to go, I'm not a frontline activist. I have a full-time job. I'm not a economic scientist and environmental scientist, but I do care and I want to turn up. And I think those events are just really important for giving people agency, because it's like that classic thing, the Murrumpy Band said, stand up and be counted. And when you stand up and you turn up, just your body mass and your presence is very, very powerful. And they do watch. They do watch. As much as perverse as it is, and it seems that they're really tending only to the industry, the minute they may not be able to have the seats of power, they start listening. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a climate integrity summit the Institute held in Canberra last week, and our executive director noted at that conference that if government and corporations weren't worried about protests, they'd stop making rules to try and squash it all the time.
That was a brilliant post,
Yeah,
that one.
and in fact, they can do it really quickly. So when we're told by governments that it's too hard, it's too difficult, there's so much red tape, we can't shut down the gas, we can't look after the environment, and yet there was a protest at a gas industry conference in South Australia, and the next day, the Parliament put through legislation, and Richard actually said for $20,000 fines, but it was worse, it was $50,000.
Yeah, right.
So
less than 24 hours.
Less than 24 hours, yeah. But I want to know what you did with shutting down the mobile. What does that mean?
Oh, that just means there's 30,000 people all filming, all
Right.
posting, and the antennas just went.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh no, we didn't we weren't like.
I thought it was like an
sabotaging.
anti-mobile
I mean,
call.
that'd be kind of
It's
sick,
like-
but that's not our jam.
As I said before, we're going to have a treat at the end because we're going to see, actually Rich is here tonight. He's the creative genius behind our Big Gas is Taking the Piss campaign that we're about to start. But before we go to that, I think it would be great if we had some conversation. I'd love to hear some questions from the floor if there are questions here. And I'd really love it even more if you gave time to other people and kept your questions short. It's far more interesting for the crowd. Have you got your finger up or are you just wiping your sweat?
Yeah, both.
Oh, okay, my friend here.
Are you sure you haven't got this right? Because I've heard from the gas companies that poor people in developing countries need our gas to end poverty. And they also tell us that this is the transition gas. How can we go straight to renewables? Surely we need to go to gas first. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's, the hilarious thing about it, it's like whack-a-mole, Like first, renewables are too expensive, and then that's kind of disproved, and then, and then it's, they just come up, you can make as many arguments as, you beat them on all the arguments and then they come up with something else. And then suddenly they decided they were the saviours of developing countries, which is kind of really novel when you think about it.
Which big corporations have always worried about deeply.
Yeah, exactly. But, to the substance, I mean, it is ridiculous, but to the substance of it, gas is a really, really expensive form of energy in Australia and globally, right? Really expensive. And so these countries get sort of hooked on gas because the gas exporters, these big multinational gas companies actually subsidise gas infrastructure, and so they build gas power stations, and then they're kind of stuck on it, and it's just and once you create those interests within the country, the contracts and the gas power stations and all of the rest of it, then they create vested interests. So there's huge pressure on those governments. But renewables are a fraction of the cost of gas in Australia and in most other countries, and so it's a created demand. And the best example is not only are prices high all the time, global gas prices are still above what we pay in Australia, but when you get, they're over the barrel of global oil and gas prices. So when you had something like the Ukraine war, global gas prices went through the roof, stratospheric, and all of these countries who were hooked on gas and hadn't got ahead with renewables paid an absolute fortune for their energy, and every dollar that they spent on those was windfall profits to these massive companies, and these companies just made trillions and trillions of dollars and cemented themselves in even more. Right, so that's how it works, and this pretense that they have some concern for developing countries is kind of sickening.
And I think a lot of our exports go to Japan, and Japan exports more gas than it imports from us.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it does. So when you see the signs that Australian gas are keeping on the neon lights in Tokyo, it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we had a colleague out from Japan, also at the Integrity Summit, and he went through exactly how much gas Japan exports, and it's more than what they import from us. And gas is a fossil fuel. Like, the lunacy of saying that the best way to transition to renewables is to use more fossils, no sense. Any other questions? It's too far. Oh, you said you'd help.
Thank you for that work. I just don't understand why the government would export gas for free. I don't believe that the people in government don't have the same facts before them that we have before us now. So therefore, I conclude that there is some incentive for the people in government to continue exporting gas for free. What is it?
Yeah. So it's definitely a fact. Like, the majority of gas in Australia doesn't have any royalties on it. The gas industry is just very, very good at lobbying, right? So I think what you've got to do is you've got to put yourself in the shoes of somebody in government, right? So politicians work really, really, they go into it for the right reasons. They work really, really hard to get elected. Sometimes they, and they're ordinary people by and large, maybe they're lawyers, but maybe they're pharmacists or unionists or whatever. They work really hard. They're totally focused on getting elected. Some of them finally find themselves in government, and they're running this thing that they don't really understand. Then on the other side, you've got these big corporations who sit in glass towers, like the big Woodside building, and they are paid to sit there. A lot of them are paid to sit there and figure out ways to get the politicians to do what they want, right? And the bureaucrats. They just have all the time in the world to think about it. And over the years, they have figured out how to get our elected representatives to do what they want, partly by cajoling, partly by the threat of running campaigns against them, partly by owning the media, all of those kinds of things. And to some extent, political donations, but I think political donations is probably the lesser part of it, because our politicians are very, very cheap, because it's not all that much money in the scheme of things. And so, but it's this, they just have the time, the space, the energy and the money to think about it and plough resources into doing it. And so they've captured our democracy. It's not just the oil and gas industry, it's the corporate sector in general, but the oil and gas industry is a classic example.
And that revolving door where you see somebody finish their term and then all of a sudden they got a job at a resource company.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of like a simple math kind of equation. You're like, I don't want to say corruption, but 1 + 1 does equal 2, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Anybody else got a question?
Yes.
Yes?
Just a question about the media. I don't know if I'm the only one, but it seems becoming more and more dominated by the Conservative voice, or industry's voice. I read a couple of Ask West Australians, and it's like I just had to put the paper down. It's just it's an insult.
Well, the Kerry Stokes has gas interests, and they just run gas industry lines continually, and it's the same with the Australian and this Australian Financial Review. They just, they're a mouthpiece for the gas industry, and I mean, it was actually in the case of the Herald Sun was running all these stories about how the Victorian government's policy to get people off gas would cost households heaps of money and be a disaster. And it turned out the Herald Sun was taking a huge amount of money from the gas industry to run a campaign, and that advertorial was part of it. So it's just like brutal kind of politics dominating the media.
I think one good thing though is that traditional or legacy media is dying. Like it's in a death spiral. It's still important, but it's moving. And if you look at the Adelaide Advertiser today, there was an announcement from the Prime Minister that they'd put $2 billion or something into the Whyalla Steelworks. So whatever you think of that, I don't know enough about that particular issue, but it was a $2 billion announcement for a major employer in the state of South Australia. The Advertiser's the main paper for Adelaide, and it had a small story on the front page, no picture of Albanese, a picture of Malinauskas kind of looking like this. And then you turned the page and there was a double page ad from crazy Clive Palmer and his Trumpian, what are they called? The trumpets of patriotism or patriots. So I thought it was a joke when I first heard it, but it's real. So Clive's just bought the first 2 pages for 30 grand, maybe probably less for the Addy. The government makes a $2 billion announcement and they get sad-faced Malinauskas and not even any show of Albanese. So, I mean, I think the media's been cooked for a while. The best thing is that legacy media is dying and, well, anyway, social media's got its problems too, hasn't it? That's another hour. Well, I'm just going to take 2 more questions because I really do want to be able to show this ad and get your reactions from it. Rich has got the mic. Oh, there you go for it, my friend.
Yep. Thank you. Commend John for how long he's been doing this for and the allies that we have in this sector. And also want to acknowledge Senator Dorinda Cox in the room here today with the Greens, who's fighting tirelessly for this. Mark, you spoke about how great the industry are lobbyists, and unfortunately this country decided that blackfellas couldn't have a voice for rights and interests for themselves. What's a lobbyist group and how do you define it and what do they do? And so how do we unpack this? You know, we're talking about, we want them to pay royalties. We want them to pay tax. We don't want them to destroy our songlines and our sacred sites and our customary law and practice of 65,000+ years. And the chicken and egg is which bit of that comes first? And if you don't have a voice, how do you communicate what's right and what's wrong and what's there? And how do we support it? I've stood with senior law men and women in Parliament House that said we are not against mining, but we are against the blatant desecration and destruction of our sacred sites, our voice, and what's right and what we know to be true, and the oppression of our people and our culture. And how do we enhance the basic dignity of what every human should enjoy on this planet? And apparently this country is a lucky country. Apparently.
Thank you. Did you want to take that question about lobbyists, Mark?
Yeah, look, 100% agree with you. It's just appalling what's been done to Indigenous people in this country, and I was incredibly disappointed by the outcome of the referendum. That's my own personal view. I thought it was just incredibly ungenerous. But I think you've got to also remember that people are being misled. You know, like there was so much misinformation put out there by these legacy media outlets. That it was really sickening. So, and I've got to say, another thing I feel really strongly about is what's being done to the Murrujuga site on the Burrup Peninsula, because that is one of the most important artworks in the world, period. You know, it's an incredibly, it is, obviously of deep significance to Indigenous people, but it's also of incredible significance globally. And the idea, in my mind, it's kind of like it's 8 times the age of the pyramids or Stonehenge, and it's a 40,000 year record of human of human existence, and it's absolutely priceless. And they've turned it into an industrial park. And I cannot imagine, you know, Britain doing that to Stonehenge or Egypt doing that to the pyramids. And I just think it's disgraceful. And hopefully we can, you know, at least stop the acid gas emissions continuing with the North West Shelf project.
Thank you. So sorry I didn't see Senator Cox here. Thanks for coming, and I would like to acknowledge you. And are there any other elected representatives or candidates in the room if you'd just like to... Yes? Candidate, good luck. State or federal? Both state? Excellent. Great, good luck. Anybody else? Yes? Oh, there's heaps. Sorry, I'm not from Fremantle, so I didn't know. Normally I would acknowledge all of the elected reps and candidates, but so my apologies, but we've got a friend here and you over there, up there. Excellent. Good luck to all of you. I am going to go to the... I'm going to throw to the ad in a second if we can get that lined up. And what's really interesting for me while they're lining it up for nights like this, you quite often hear people say, oh, I went along and I listened to something, but it's always the same old crowd, we're preaching to the converted. Don't believe that, because movements don't start by staying at home. Change starts by going out and being in a room with like-minded people. You are much more powerful coming to nights like this than you are sitting at home saying, I can't be bothered to go and talk and preach to the converted. And there's meetings like this happening all the time over the country. So thank you for coming, it was my question from that. And I'm going to go now to, these are the billboards that you're going to be seeing pop up all over Australia. It says, Big Gas is taking the piss. And then it has small writing that I can't read, but will have a gas fact on it. Maybe you know it, Mark, do you? Thank you. And these billboards are accompanying this ad that you're going to see on Catch Up TV, and hopefully you'll share. And this is why I said about preaching to the converted. I think this ad goes outside of what you might call preaching to the converted. I think the guys have come up with a really funny, very shareable ad that will go across demographics. So hit it.
Okay, Susie. Julie, do you want anything?
Yeah, cheers, everything. Oh, no, I'm all right. I'm all good. All right.
Big Gas takes 73% of WA's gas for free. That's just taking the piss. It's time Parliament acts. Authorised by the Australia Institute, Canberra.
Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, good. You get shivers. That's amazing. You're all going to share it, right, when you see your socials and when you see it. We played that at work. I played that at work to the team back in Canberra, and I was on. I wasn't in the office, so I was watching them, and I couldn't see the ad, and I couldn't actually even hear it. But I was just so great watching their four faces go. And then our executive director said, well, that's just about as far out as we've gone with an ad, but okay. Mark, would you like to say any closing remarks?
I reckon John should have... have you got any other thoughts you want to share, John?
Sure. I think I spoke to Richard. Richard Burney, I don't know, where are you, Richard? I worked with Richard with this ad, and we worked with Richard with this ad. I came up with an idea on my back porch and then sent a video of myself explaining it to him for like 5 minutes. I'm like, it's going to be a crazy man video.
Oh, we've got that.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, here we go. So here's a guy over here, and I called him Smug Prick. Smug Prick comes in here, And then, it was going to be like about a minute long, and Richard just brought it right and distilled it, add some really beautiful things, extremely talented. Him and John Linton did an amazing job. So I just want to actually give a big props to Richard Burney, please. Yeah. And yeah, the thing is trying to hit. I mean, we're all here. We all know what's going on. And there's a certain amount of preaching to the converted here, but there's so many people who just want information. They want to know what's going on, and they need it to be palatable. I know I do. Like, just give me it simple. And so the idea was just like, how do we take, something that's sacred, the pub in Australia. There's a lot of other things that are sacred, a lot more sacred, and how we take a resource that's valued, beer, and just really kind of like not dumb it down, but just put it straight in, and that's how it's meant to be. Yeah, the guy who grabbed the beer and spat it back in is. Please share. It's for the state election and it's for the federal election, and wherever you can make it as viral as possible. It was amazing once it came in, and then we fact checked it with Oz Institute, and they're like, we're wanting to do something as well. And it's been an amazing collaboration that I feel really honored to be a part of, and that Richard and John really just brought to the table. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the genesis of it. And thank you for all being here, of course.
Yes, thanks, John. We were pretty stoked at the Australia Institute as well when we talked to the guys at Berlin, and they said, John Butler's got this funny little idea. And good on you for coming up with it, and good on the guys for making it into something that we're all going to be able to share. And thanks everybody for coming tonight. Good luck with your state election in a couple of weeks. Good luck with the work that you've got ahead of you, bringing the gas industry into some sort of semblance of, good citizenship. It's a hard job. It's a long job. You're not going to win it between now and the state election. You're not going to win it between now and the federal election. And that's why I think organisations like the Australia Institute are really important, because we don't work on election cycles. We work on long-term strategy and good policy. And that's why we're really happy to come here at any time, whether it's an election period or not. That's not important to us. What's important is sharing good ideas and getting good policy out there. And please, if you ever have any information that you want or more details on our research, we're very responsive and we'll get back to you. And I so appreciate everybody coming out tonight. So thanks very much.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.